Hey guys, so today is July 20th. It is a Tuesday. We've got ourselves a balance patch. So it seems like they've shifted from every Wednesday, well, not every Wednesday, but shifted from being Wednesdays to Tuesdays. And so we have a balance patch. I'm going to go over the balance patch kind of with the same criteria that I always do. I like to look at it from a few different perspectives. Primarily, I want to look at it from the perspective of um, competitive, which means a coordinated gameplay. This is high level Heroes Lounge. This is high level CCL. This is high level NGS. Coordinated gameplay, as well as Storm League. Now, keep in mind, Storm League could be any level range, as well as any, I guess, like power level or whatever. But mainly just uncoordinated gameplay. So let's get right into it. We do have a hero rework, and that is Lieutenant Morales. I will come back to that and make a separate video for it, most likely today or tomorrow. So don't worry about that one too much because that will come back a little bit later. So we'll cover all of that. Let's get down to the heroes. So let's start off with Blaze. Blaze, after his recent buff, became a very powerful tank, as well as a very powerful solo laner. He already was pretty strong in the competitive play, but he had like a 40% win rate in Storm League, like 43 or 44 or something like that. So they buffed a lot of his stuff, gave him kind of a mini rework, and made him do a lot more damage with still having the same utility. Seems like now they're reducing the damage potential that he has for both his burst on his E and his Q, but trying to keep his utility there. Overall, this will make a pretty significant difference to him in both competitive and in Storm League. I think that in Storm League, it's still enough damage to be worth it, but I think in competitive, it'll bring him down just a little bit in the priority of when people are drafting him. Muradin, Perfect Storm, Stormbolt damage bonus per heroic basic attack is being increased. We kind of noticed that his damage from this change really got dropped, and I think this will bring it a lot closer to where it used to be when you would stack by using your Q. Sledgehammer, additional functionality, increased Stormbolt's cooldown reduction from basic attacks by 0.5 seconds. I think this will be a pretty good change. Overall, both of these changes will increase the win rate of Muradin in Storm League, but he'll still be drafted in the same positions that he was in the competitive environment. Artanis, Bruiser, he gets kind of a mini rework. His charge range is being increased from his W. Phase Prism cast time increased from 0.625 seconds to 0.25 seconds. So this is a pretty huge cast time increase. New functionality. Artanis no longer has to channel while Phase Prism Missile is active. Artanis gains Unstoppable for 1.5 seconds after swapping with an enemy hero. So you swap with someone, you become unstoppable for longer than cleanse time. But this is kind of interesting to see that the cast time's bumped up by a pretty good amount, and you can still cast it while queuing. So I'm curious to see what this will do. No longer has to channel while Phase Prism Missile is active. Interesting. I'll have to see what that looks like in game to give a better idea of that. Purifier Beam cooldown's being reduced, mana cost being reduced. It was kind of the underutilized ult. Reactive Parry, new functionality, hitting enemy hero, a Twin Blades or Blade Dash grants charge. Stacks 2 times. Charge of block anyways. Then we have Shield Battery, new functionality. Shield's overloads cooldown recharges 125% faster while active. Passive reduces its cooldown by 4 seconds. So we'll have two options now. We'll have the option of having more shields or bigger shields. I think that's a pretty interesting option just because there are builds that would rather you have a bigger shield, and there are builds that you'd rather have a faster shield. So I think both are interesting. Follow through is being removed. Final cut is being added. After using an ability, your next basic attack within 6 seconds deals 40% more damage. That's follow through. While under 25% health, this bonus is increased to 60%. I think follow through was 50%, and so now we have kind of in between the two. I think that this is overall a nerf, but I could be off on how big follow through actually was. Blade of the Templar, attack speed bonus is being increased. Zealot charge, the distance is being increased. or sorry, the distance being reduced. This is to compensate for the distance just default being increased up here. Overall, I don't think this will make any major difference to Artanis in the competitive environment, but it may make him feel a little bit more fluid when it comes to the Storm League environment. So he'll probably be played a little bit more than he was before, but I'd imagine his win rate won't change too much, and his competitive environment won't change. So now let's get into, and I apologize if I was covering anything. I'll drop down my camera a tad just so you guys still read everything. Dahaka. Dahaka has been in an interesting spot. He's had a lower than average win rate almost consistently, yet he has the highest win rate in CCL. One of the highest win rates in CCL. In fact, I was gonna do a video that said why Dahaka was so good in the competitive scene, and I haven't had the opportunity to do that yet. But yeah, let's talk about him. So attacks per second is being increased from 1.11 to 1.25. That is a pretty good amount. It's 13%, or sorry, it's 14%, but it actually won't equate to 14%. It'll equate to about 10% more damage. Burrow, additional functionality. Dahaka can move at 50% movement speed during burrow, so that was one of the talents that he had. Lurker Strain, additional functionality, deals 125 damage to enemies hit by Burrow. That's pretty cool. One Who Collects. Additional functionalities, Darkstorm deals 40% more damage to mercenaries. Okay. So this talent was the one that gave you more from killing minions. Now you can do camps with your Darkstorm and Darkstorm build. Level 7 Feeding Frenzy, cooldown reduction reduced. That's your Q talent. Additional functionality increases the duration of drag. So that was two different talents. Now it's both one talent. Paralyzing Enzyme, new functionality. Passive drag slows enemies by 40% for 2 seconds after it ends. Gambit, when drag ends, deal an additional 280 damage to the target over 2 seconds. Each death reduces the damage by 40 up to 5 times. So 5 times 40 is 200, so keep in mind that you'll still have 80 damage left over, even after all of your gambits are used. Overall, this is a pretty powerful talent, and these will both be very competitive against the meta talents right now. So, interesting. Ferocious Stalker, level 13, damage bonus increase from 50 to 60%. That's when you're leaving a bush. I like this talent more for the slow aspect than the extra damage, but the extra damage is certainly nice. And then we have Pack Leader, additional functionality, gain 15% attack speed while in a bush, and 5 seconds after. Honestly, the big thing that I'm going to say about this is buffing a lot of underutilized talents, and it's really buffing the auto attack build considerably. So the old meta build, so the current meta build is either W with movement speed or full W. If there's a lot of bushes, you generally go W with movement speed, and then if there's not a lot of bushes around the fights, you usually just go W. The point of those builds is to basically be this major force that goes into a fight, gets 2 or 3 big heals, and potentially adds a swing in momentum either from distracting the enemy backline for a long period of time or by silencing a specific target, dragging a different target. The old meta build was you would take things that increased your attack damage and you would then push heavily. And then when it's your time to join the fight, you've already gotten so much value for your team that when you join the fight, even if you break even in the fight, even if you get behind, you're still ahead because of the global value you brought. So if they send someone to stop you, then you have a global and you generally win the fight. And if they don't send someone to stop you, then you generally still join the fight, but you also take down like a fort. And so with the increased attack speed and the attack speed talents at 13 and 16, as well as the buff in the level 4 that was already better for that build, the attack speed build on Dahaka should become the new meta build for competitive play. I think it's probably debatable, and it'll probably be a little bit better on specific maps for Storm League. I think the W build is probably still going to be generally better for Storm League, or the kind of race car build. But I do think these changes will make a big difference in both competitive Dahaka. I actually think that it'll make competitive Dahaka overpowered. He's still sitting at one of the highest win rate heroes in CCL, sitting at a 65% win rate in CCL. If I was to go in here and go heroes profile, and we were to go to community esports, we were to go to CCL, overall hero stats, we go to win rate. The last time I checked, Dahaka 57%. Okay, so he's no longer where I saw him last. I saw him at about 65. So he must have lost a few in the previous week or two. But he was at 65. 12% of the games played he is in. That means he's been played in 26 games. Seeing as he's getting buffs in his competitive build, I would say he's going to bump up to potentially that 60-65 range, which is pretty intense, especially since some of the other soul laners like Hogger just got nerfed. Not this patch, but in the last patch, we can see if he got nerfed this patch. So Dahaka, competitive level just got bumped up considerably. And I think the auto attack build, especially if you're on a big map that you can get a lot of value where it's hard to travel from lane to lane, like Alterac, even though there's not a lot of bushes on Alterac, that's okay. Cursed Hollow, anything that the objective is going to be in the opposite lane of where you are, you can get a lot of value out of this new Dahaka. Karazim, new talent, level 20, Fists of Legends. It's a great talent. Gained 50% of the benefit from both level 1 talents that were not chosen. That's pretty interesting. Now it says, so what happens with Insight if you didn't pick Insight? Do you need to complete the quest? Do you just get the mana benefits? I don't know. I'd be curious to see what happens with Insight. But that's a kind of a neat talent. His level 20 upgrades are not that big of an upgrade. They're very good, but I could see this talent gaining some value from it depending on the match. We've seen that particularly in Storm League, the reason that Karazim has such a high win rate is that he gets so much time to attack. So what I would say is I would say for Storm League, this could be a pretty good buff, but it's not game changing. And I don't think it'll make a difference in competitive. Competitive people would rather take like the activatable to get extra Q charges to either do more aggressive damage in the backline if you took like Way of the Thousand Fists at 16, or the extra cleanses. Those are going to be much more valuable. All right, Lucio. High 5. Ally healing is being reduced. Slip, change functionality while wall ride is active. Passing near an enemy hero increases movement speed by 40% and grants 15 armor for 1 second. It's okay, won't really change too much. Mixing fire removes functionality. Casting high 5 on an enemy no longer heals or grants unstoppable to Lucio. That's actually pretty good. I think this is a good change to kind of reduce the viability, the safety net of this talent, because you could jump to all the enemies, gain your full health bar, jump to all your allies after they try to deal with you, gain your full health bar, and then the enemies would be pretty close to being clicked again, and then you could just jump to all the enemies and gain your health bar again. And so you were really hard to target, and you were keeping your whole team alive and damaging the enemies at the same time. This is good because now you have to have some time in between. As long as the enemies have an auto attacker that can hit you no matter where you're jumping around, you're at risk, and I think this is a good change. So overall, this will drop him a little bit in priority in the competitive scene. This really won't affect too much in Storm League. Stuka, Fetid Touch, additional functionality, ranged attacks and melee attacks are now targetable with an active. That's actually pretty cool, because now if you need to increase your race potential, you can toggle it and increase your damage. So if you want to speed up a camp or anything, but if you want to go back to harassing the enemies by just doing light pokes, you can toggle it. So overall, I think that's a pretty cool change, especially for those that liked W build while you had the melee capabilities. It won't make a difference in competitive play, but it will be a nice quality of life change for those that like that unique playstyle on Stukov. Tronda, Sentinel, additional functionality. If an enemy hero dies while revealed by Sentinel, reset its cooldown. Interesting. Hunter's Mark trait, additional functionality. Tronda's basic attacks heal for 2% of her max health, doubled against marked targets. Oh, that's just so flat 2% on everything that you attack, you are healed, and then if you mark a target, it's 4%. This is only for yourself. True Shot Aura, passive bonus, it's being increased. Active Aura increased, cool. And that's a pretty significant increase. It's double increase for passive and a pretty solid increase for activatable. Mark of Mending, new functionality, basic attacks against marked targets heal all nearby allied for 4% of their health. So what this used to do was any hero's basic attacks would heal that target. Now it's when you throw it on a target, your basic attacks heal all ally nearby people. There's pros and cons to this. The pro is that you can mark a target and heal everyone around you for, I think you can get 3 or 4 auto attacks off while the mark's going, depending on your talents. So that could mean 12 to 16% max health. Well, a healing totem from Rhaegar is at most 20%. And the fact that you can do it around the cooldown of healing totem, but do it much faster, seems pretty good. Does it beat the single target Elun's chosen? Not necessarily, but it's also not too bad, especially if you have a lot of beefy teams. I mean, 4% max health. So if you have like double bruiser with a tank or double tank, this could be a lot more significant healing. And there is a whole build based around trait. So you can make your trait last longer, have lower cooldown while activating your trait, or while attacking something with a trait, as well as there's some AoE marks with trait. And also you can throw more traits as of level 20 if you go Starfall. So I think these are enough trait buffs for me to finally say that there is a viable trait build that is competitive to the other builds. Ranger's Mark, cooldown reduction of Hunter's Mark per basic attack, cooldown reduction from 1 to 2, so it's increased. Cooldown reduction is being increased, so that's huge. Cooldown reduction of Lunar Flare from basic attacks against marked targets from 3 to 4. So, again, huge buffs to trait. So, what I'm going to say is that she now has a viable trait build. Is it more competitive? I think there's a lot of potential for this to be competitive, because you got to remember, the trait isn't just doing all of these things that the talents are doing. It still does an armor reduction on the enemy, increasing the damage that you're doing to the enemy. Darnasian archery stack bonus is being increased. I'm not a huge fan of this talent. I think outside of competitive, it has a lot of potential. In competitive, though, I mean, unless you're running like a second healer that's a lot more dedicated, I would rather take the cleanse in competitive, or in normal games, I'd rather take like the percent health and lower cooldown on your W. Especially since if you pop someone with the percent health, and it finishes off that target, you get a reset and you can just go again. So I would rather those, but it still is a good talent for Storm League and ARMs as well. Overall, I think her win rate and her playability win rate in both competitive and Storm League should be increased. Asmodan, Demonic Invasion, cooldowns being increased, the explosion damage is being reduced, Hellforged armor bonus is being reduced. So they're just hitting him with the basic meta things that are a little hard to deal with. This ult is fun to play, but not fun to play against, because there's no real answers. If you kill them, they explode anyways. And once he throws it out, you need to decide, do we deal with Asmo or do we deal with this? And Asmo's already gone. So it's just not fun to play against. So I can understand them nerfing it to where it's at least a balanced win rate. Cassia has been a dominant force in both competitive as well as Storm League. Blinding Light damage bonus is being reduced. Thunderstroke initial damage bonus is being reduced. Surge of Light's damage bonus is being reduced. Additional blinded damage bonus is being increased. So they are trying to encourage people to go more talented outside of just the meta build. Overall, this is a unchanged thing because of this. So this talent didn't really get buffed. It's kind of more of a necessity to take that. It's just that her overall builds got nerfed and her meta build got nerfed. She's slowly getting moved down, and she was already not like first priority pick, especially with Vala in her current state. So I'm not going to say this is going to make too much of a difference, but it will slightly bring her down, especially if they nerf Vala heavily. Falstad, Gathering Storm, damage bonus per stack increased from 0.4 to 0.5. This is closer to where I said this talent needed to be, but it still isn't where I want this talent to be. Dishonorable Discharge, additional functionality at 30% damage bonus, reduce lightning rod's cooldown by additional 2 seconds. That is pretty good. W build's kind of gotten the nerf bad a few too many times, so getting a buff like this is beneficial. The stacks are still going to be very difficult to stack, but having the lower cooldown just makes it a little bit more valuable. Frequent Flyer, duration reduced from 5 to 4. That's fine. It's a nerf to the meta build, but not that big of a nerf. Won't change him too much. Secret weapon damage bonus is being reduced from 90 to 75. This talent was a secret weapon. It was underpicked. I said that it was really good. He got his rework. His other build kind of got nerfed a little bit. This build got a couple buffs, and they buffed secret weapon again. I was like, no, you don't do that. And so this is exactly where it should be. Boomerang damage bonus has been increased. This is probably where it should be. I actually think Falstad's buff nerf was perfect. I think that it won't really affect him too much, but it will potentially move him up or down just slightly in win rate, but probably not popularity, which is good. I think those are perfect. Jaina, we got a little bit of a teaser for her changes. Frost Shards, Frostbolt, Pierce increase from 1 to 2 additional targets. So instead of it piercing just the first target, it will pierce a second target, so it could hit potentially 3 people. What this is going to do is potentially increase her camp clear, her damage in team fights, and also poke potential, because you can bounce through a frontline minion and a backline minion to still hit someone, especially if you take that extra range level 1. Level 7, Iceland's cooldown reduction increase from 1.25 to 1.5. This was the nerf that brought her out of the meta, so for them to revert this nerf could potentially bring her back in the meta. Ice Flows change functionality. Cone of Cold hitting an enemy hero reduces its cooldown by 2 seconds, doubled if they are chilled, up to a maximum of 8 seconds per cast. You can't like infinitely do it. That's been kind of my downside on why Ice Flows isn't meta, but if you could infinitely do it, it would probably be like a level 20 talent. Ring of Frost, cooldown reduced from 80 to 70. It didn't really need it, but it doesn't hurt. Northern Exposure, the armor amounts being increased. Cold Snap, the cooldown reductions being increased. Ring of Frost was really good, but it was kind of used more as a combo. So I think this is going to bring Jaina up in both competitive and Storm League. These earlier changes more for Storm League, and these later changes more for competitive. If you think about it this way, you Ring of Frost someone, the number of people that you needed to hit just got reduced. Because if you hit 4 people with Ring of Frost, you have a 5-second cooldown, and they're going to be rooted for 3 seconds. More up to 5 seconds if you're rooting them before the ring and you're rooting them after the ring, which means you can Ring of Frost 4 people twice. And then that would just put a 5-second cooldown on your Ring of Frost again, meaning that if they don't move or don't die, you have it again. You can get many more Ring of Frosts. In fact, let's look at it just this way. If you entomb a single person and you hit him with a Ring of Frost, you have a 45-second cooldown. I am doing my math so wrong. You have a 55-second cooldown on the Ring of Frost, and Entomb's a 50-second cooldown. So every Entomb, you can hit someone with Ring of Frost to follow up the Entomb. If you hit more than one person, you're good. Another good example would be if you taunt someone with Garrosh or Garrosh, you just need to hit one person. With Varian, you can just hit, and the cool part about Ring, let's say you Varian taunt and then you Ring, you could do the Ring on this side, so that let's say the taunt is here, and you can Ring someone from the taunt, and then all the way around to this side, you might also hit an extra person, so that your cooldown would get a lot closer to the cooldown of taunt. I would say casting Ring of Frost, I always have the same rule as Diablo. With Diablo, if you're going to do an APOC, you should never do an APOC that doesn't at least stun one person. And that's why we do the APOC combo. We always Apocalypse, flip someone into the Apocalypse. So I recharge them out of the Apocalypse, we flip them back in. The same is true with Jaina. At level 16, you can root someone in where you're going to throw your Ring of Frost. But if you synergize with your teams, you can always land a Ring of Frost without needing that level 16. And so I think that this is a huge piece for Jaina in the competitive environment, is that Ring of Frost is now this thing that has a very low cooldown, especially if you're landing it. I mean, that's, of course, level 16. Hold up. Is this correct? Level 16? No, that's got to be a level 20 thing, and that's a mistake. Because that would be really good. Yeah, I'm guessing this is level 20, and that was a mistake. But yeah, having a lower cooldown on Ring means earlier plays can happen more often, and having this increased cooldown reduction at level 20 means that you can take multiple fights after another with lower cooldown abilities to follow up. Like when Entomb, they're going to be silenced in that Entomb for 3 seconds or so, and when they're trying to get out, they're going to be rooted and take like Blizzard and everything. So yeah, more synergy, more playability. I think Jaina is definitely going to be in a good spot, but probably not overpowered. Zagara, basic attack range is being increased from 5.5 to 6.6. Creep Tumor, remove functionality no longer increases Zag's attack range while being on creep. Movement speed bonus for Zagara's summons increased while on creep. Baneling Barrage, charges reduced from 4 to 2. Cast time increased. Okay, about doubled. Additional functionality launches 2 Banelings per cast, so less mana cost per cast, which is good. The cooldown will roll over 2 at a time, and that's my notification, not yours. I'm just going to close that so we don't need to worry about that again. And Roachling's basic attack damage is being increased. Jagged Barb's attack damage bonus is being increased. Fury of the Storm is being removed. Broodmother, every 3rd basic attack also launches a Baneling towards the target. Pact Instinct, Zagara and her summons deal 25% more damage to the target attacked by a Hunter Killer in the last 3 seconds. So what this tells me is that her auto attack build got buffed. You could go more of an auto attack build in lane and then, or be more of an auto attacker as the game goes on and have pretty high DPS. I would actually imagine that her current DPS at 20 is comparable to like Vala and Cassia at 20. Keep in mind that Vala and Cassia can throw all the damage exactly where they want, but where like her Banelings might not hit the targets that you want, and her roaches don't hit the targets that you want. But that's interesting. I think when they nerfed her level 16 talent from 1.5 to 1.25, she kind of lost in viability, and she's always a tricky one because she's such a lane bully against specific heroes that that it's hard to balance. But I think that she is strong again, and she can kind of come back to being a lane bully. There are some bug fixes. Karazim Insight grants its full cooldown reduction to Radiant Dash. Johanna, Shield Glare's damage now scales with level. Did that ever make the difference in any games? I've actually seen a game that it did. I was watching, I think I was watching a Storm League game. There's a streamer, I think it was Kyle Ferguson, and he threw a Shield Glare and someone lived with 7 health, and he was more than leveled 4. So it has made the difference in some games. So this is a very small buff, but it probably won't make the difference in most games. But yeah, so overall, the changes are, I would say, pretty good. I would say they hit a lot of the areas we were worried about. I feel like this buff to Dahaka is a mistake in the sense that he was already very strong and he might be too strong now. But yeah, overall, I would say it is a good change. I think it makes heroes like Tyrande a little bit more fun. Potentially Artanis, I'll have to see how that feels. It did fix the issues for Muradin and Blaze. Muradin doing just a tad bit too low damage for what people were used to. Blaze for doing a tad bit more damage than people were used to, kind of fixed those. Karazim, nothing major. Lucio fixed, I mean, it took a stab at the problem. I don't know if it fixed the problem. Stukov, it was a quality of life change. Tyrande, I think the new trait build should be pretty fun and a little bit more engaging with like W resets and stuff. Asmodan, I think it took a stab at the problem. Cassia, I think it took a stab at the problem. Falstad, I think, was a great change. Nerfed a tad bit of what was a little strong, buffed a tad bit of what was a little weak. His W build could still use a look at, especially since it's like really hard to get those quest stacks. But there are quests in the game that people just know you don't finish, and so that might be one of the quests that they're thinking of, like, hey, it's got an end to it, but we don't expect people to ever hit that end. Treat it as just an infinite quest. And then we have Jaina, again, kind of hit the few things that dropped her down from meta in the past and brought her back up. Will she be meta again? I don't know. There's a lot of competitive mages right now. And Zagara, I think these will be hard to tell until we see a few weeks of those gameplay. And that is it, guys. Those are the balance patch changes for July 20th, 2021. I will get to that rework video as soon as possible. Thank you guys so much for watching, and hopefully that gives you guys a good look at what's changed in competitive, what's changed in Storm League. And yeah, feel free to check out any of my other videos. Stay tuned for that Morales video. My hope is to get it out later today.